back, listeners, to the BizBlend podcast, where business meets life, heart meets hustle, and where we are not afraid to question the status quo. I'm your host, Sana, and in this episode, we are diving into something that's honestly too often ignored in leadership. How do you perform at your best without sacrificing your health, energy, or fulfillment? And let's let's admit that it is inevitable as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur, as a business owner. It's your business is your baby. You're building something which is so much near and dear to you. So I think burnout is something which we cannot prevent, but probably we can embrace it and go through it. So, to discuss this and the other aspects, our guest knows this journey firsthand, listeners. Meet Rachel Edmondson-Clarke. She went from a high level corporate leadership to collapsing on her office floor from burnout. That breaking point reshaped everything. And now, with over 20 years of experience working with Fortune 500 companies, top executives, and fast growing businesses, she helps leaders master high performance without burning out. Obviously, using a powerful mix of neuroscience, psychology, and behavioral science. And today, in this episode of BizBlend, we are cutting through the noise to talk about what high performance really means and why so many leaders, entrepreneurs get it wrong, and how we can redefine success in a way which is actually sustainable. So, with that, Rachel, welcome to the show, and let's dive right into our conversation today.
Oh, Sana, thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here. What you create with the platform, not just with BizBlend, but across all the 16 shows that you run, I think is absolutely incredible. And it's just a delight to meet you. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Rachel. Absolutely. So, before we talk about the topic, uh, let's talk about your journey, Rachel. So, you went from a high level corporate leadership, working in Fortune 500 companies, but then you suffered from burnout. You collapsed on your office floor. I mean, if it's okay with you, can you walk us through that particular phase or moment, that breaking point, which kind of reshaped everything for you?
Of course, of course. I can remember it vividly. I was in my glass fronted office and I was preparing to go into the boardroom. And instead of walking out the door, I found myself lying on the floor staring up at the ceiling tiles. And I'd collapsed. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. And I didn't know what was happening at the time. But I later realized that I had had a form of a panic attack and it was the result of months and years, if I'm honest, of habits that had left me depleted from working longer and longer hours, um, disappointed with myself for not taking better care of my health. And also, I felt incredibly guilty as well because I had neglected the most important relationship in my life. And at that point, like, I knew something had to change. Like, my body was no longer allowing me to continue. It had put the brakes on. So something had to change.
Oh, that is terrible. Rachel, thank you for sharing that. Um, yeah, I mean, let's practically, let's admit that yes, as a professional in a high stress work environment, or as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur, business owner, sometimes we take it too much upon us because it's kind of a culturally, or maybe I don't know, imposed on us, superimposed on us, that if we are working hard, we are putting more number of hours, uh, it's kind of evident that we are doing great. It's, kind of glorifying the grind, and I have been guilty of it too. So I'm curious to know, Rachel, that is the culture shifting, or if we are still rewarding the wrong things out there?
I think it depends. It depends enormously, not only on who you are, because you might be working for yourself, or you might be working for a large corporation. I think it depends enormously. And I think within large companies, it can often depend on manager to manager and what that culture and what that environment is like. The thing that I think we often miss is that a focus on how we are feeling and of restoration to be able to restore and enable us to have the capacity to lead and show up at our best actually does two simultaneous things. So not only when you work in a culture and when an organization that does care about your well-being, mental, physical, emotional well-being, and encourages habits of restoration throughout the day as well as in cycles of days and weeks and so on. Not only does that enable better performance for the individual, but that also creates
Hmm.
cultures that organizations want where people feel included and engaged and valued and psychologically safe to challenge people. So I think very often we think of it just as at an individual performance level, but when we are focusing on how we are feeling, when we are paying attention to that, and when we are making sure that we are restoring ourselves on a regular, consistent basis, that it also has this impact on culture as well. Because when we are approaching burnout or when we are there,
Mhm.
it become more anxious, we'll be more heightened to threat. We will see
Yes.
the negative in so much, and we're not going to show up at our best. We'll likely start to disengage from work,
Yes.
or it will
Mhm.
affect our performance. It will affect our physical health, our mental health, our cognitive ability to see or act clearly. And so this is why it's so important that we are regularly, as I say, tuning in to how we feel and not doing what I did, which was for years, let's face it, it was for years, sort of adopt these habits that had left me and had led me to that point where I ended up on the floor. My coping mechanism was to work more and to work longer and to work harder. That was my form of being able to regulate where I was at that point in my time, in time. And it had some, and it's not a strategy that works. It is not a strategy that works.
It is not. It's absolutely not. And you described that, those feelings so uh, aptly, because not only physical, it's mentally and emotionally, it creeps within you. I mean, you are disengaged from your work, you're disengaged socially, you're disengaged from yourself, because the hardest part is that it gets late until you realize, and then the normal, the activities which you used to love doing on a daily basis, you feel like, no, I can't do this, I don't even feel like doing anything. So that's a very, very hard feeling to have. That's a very terrible feeling to have.
It is, and I would, and if anyone is feeling like that, it's time to take stock, and it's time to look at how you can restore, in
Mm.
particular, your mood, your energy, and your ability to deal with that stress. Someone said to me the other day, and I thought this was a great way of looking at it, which is, what if the 30-hour-a-week version of you delivered greater value and quality to your business or your company and the 60, 70-hour week version of you. And
Mm.
it feels so counterintuitive when we are busy, when we are stressed, to take time to go for go for a walk, or to prepare something nutritious for lunch and to sit down and eat it perhaps in the garden in the sunshine, or to make sure that we go to bed on time. I say on time, but what that is for you, so that you are prioritizing that time in bed, even if you're not sleeping, you are prioritizing that rest. These are things that are absolutely, absolute key. And it feels counterintuitive, but actually the small things, the little things are the things that matter and make up the big things. And I would, and if we think about the inputs, the things that impact our mood, our energy, and our ability to deal with stress, it's all the stuff that our grandma told us. It's the, how, have you slept? Have you ate well? Have you eaten recently? So many leaders will skip lunch or breakfast, and then they'll just grab something that's on the go. So, sleep, eating regularly, hydration, all the stuff that we know about movement. And by movement, I don't mean necessarily going to the gym and, putting in, some hard cardio sessions. I'm talking about restorative movement, whether that be yoga, it could be meditation, it could be walking, but with gentle stretching. But we're very sedentary these days as well. We spend a lot of time at our desks, and it's that movement, and then daylight and nature. How much of that are we actually getting? And it's interesting. I was talking to a dear friend of mine on Tuesday this week, and we were talking
Yeah.
about this high performance, and he was asking me, what did I think about that high performance? And I think, one of the things that I don't like about that is it suggests this another level, like I'm pushing, I'm striving, whereas actually I think what we are desperate for is, you said it, Sana, is connection, and connection to ourselves, a better connection to the people that are around us that we love and that we care about the most. And, and better connection to, to the earth, and to be able to earth and ground ourselves, because from that place, that allows us to have that space of clarity, of strength, and to be able to really decide what's most important and be led by that.
Absolutely. That is beautifully put, Rachel. Beautifully put. And, you know, I mean, it couldn't be more relevant because given your background in sales and marketing within large organizations, how do you see this pressure to constantly hit target sales number? It can be so dreadful, like a weekly sales number, then a monthly sales number, then a yearly, and then all that, impacting leadership well-being. And what's the cost we are not talking about?
I think the cost that we're not talking about, particularly as business owners and leaders, is the capacity that we're leaving on the table. So if we think about just the majority of the population, in general terms, are probably feeling pretty unsettled, or could be struggling, or in crisis. There's very few in the population that I would class as doing well or absolutely thriving. And with that, that leaves a huge amount of human capacity on the table. So if you're running your own business, you think about, well, actually, what am I capable of doing, and how do I perform at my best? And what are the inputs? What are the habits that enable me to be able to perform at my best? And, really, like, are you paying full attention to those, and are you prioritizing them? I was working with one of my private clients. This is a number of weeks ago, And I remember the penny really dropped for him when he realized that to go on a bike ride, because he loves riding his bike, was mission critical, was business critical. Sorry, it was business critical. Prior to that, it was like, oh, but hang on a minute. I like actually shouldn't I be working now and shouldn't I be doing this? Well, if you're not operating at your best, what's going to be the input that enables you to operate at your best? And he was like, "Well, actually, if I do get out on my bike over lunchtime and I prioritize doing a 45-minute ride, actually, I come back into the afternoon, I get a lot more done. I'm a lot more energized. I can deal with things much better because because I've done that." So I think that's the thing that we're missing, is that we're missing this capacity and we're missing this opportunity to really enable people to come and give their best at work and for us to give our best as well.
I love this distinction, Rachel, because I think a lot of us we just keep adding more tools or habits without actually addressing, what is our bandwidth in there. So I completely connect with what you said, especially about building capacity rather than just focusing on capability or mindset.
Absolutely,
And, you yeah, yeah, go on, Rachel, go on.
No, I'm sorry. I think the line is not so great, and I apologize. I talked over you. Go on, please.
Yeah, okay. So, you help leaders build authentic influence and trust without falling into the burnout cycle. But uh, once again, if I go back to the beginning of our conversation, in high pressure environments, Rachel, how realistic is that? I mean, can leaders have, truly have it all, or it is something which has to be sacrificed?
I think it's entirely realistic. Um, and I know that through what I've created in my own life and with my own business. And I know that in terms of what I've been able to support and help others to achieve as well. And here's the thing, I think we talk a lot about work life balance. I think work life integration is a much more realistic kind of way of looking at things. So balance suggests that it's this or it's that. And almost like you're walking on a bit of a tightrope there and you're balancing those two things out. Actually, I have over the last 10 years built a business and a life that I absolutely love and that supports my health, my family, my mission, um, and 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 the clients and the people that I work with. And it's through that integration, and it's through kind of being being aware of of those of the things that really work for you. And this is the thing, we're all different. I also have a background in health coaching, and this idea of bio individuality, that we're all different, and what works for one person might not work for another. So helping people to work out what are the ingredients that really help them to perform at their best, and then how they can integrate that into their life, because let's face it, some of us will have young children, some of us will have aging parents, some of us will have spouses, some of us won't. And so what we can do and what we can is going to be different and unique for each and every person. But how you then integrate that into your life and how that becomes part of who you are, just enables you to show up as this wholehearted leader, and one that is in alignment with good energy, good mood, and they're able to master, kind of the emotional thing. So when the when things do happen, whether it's a tech issue or a people issue, or the pressure is on because of the sales targets, you're able to manage that. Your bandwidth for dealing with that stress is so much wider because you've already looked after the key ingredients that support you being at your best.
That definitely makes sense. Definitely makes sense. And this is important because a lot of listeners, they are skeptical, you including myself, whether this ideal balance that we kind of see talked about in different circles, it actually holds up when the stakes are high.
Oh, can we talk about this? I would love to talk about this. I really, you're right. I heard this great quote the other day, and I'm not going to retell it word for word, and so forgive me for that. But it was about a martial arts expert, and it was he was with the master, the martial arts master was with his student, and the student said to the martial arts master, "Master, you are always in alignment." And the master looked to the student and he said, "I am not in alignment, but I am constantly making small corrections." And that really resonated with me because I think, you're right to be skeptical. There isn't a perfect balance. You're absolutely right to say that. I think what happens is we can get to a place where we are making smaller corrections and we pick things up much quicker, and we're more sensitive to that, so that we're not having big swings in terms of this. And I think the other thing that we've got to recognize is that life isn't some sort of perfect um, landscape all of the time. There are days where you can absolutely look after yourself. I'd call them and this comes from Brian Johnson actually. He calls them bubble wrap days. These are the days when you can go and do the spiritual retreat. You can sleep in. They're the bubble wrap days. Let's be honest. There's not that many of those that happen in life. Most of the time, we are out in the wild. We are kind of cutting our way through the jungle and the undergrowth and, kind of making our tracks, and we're out in the wild, we're doing that. And sometimes we are paying the price because we've got a project, we've got a deadline, we've got a sales target that we need to hit, and we've got to pull out the stops. And it means that we're not sleeping, and it means that, or we're not getting as much sleep as we would do normally. It means we're not connecting with our families as we would do normally. And so what I, kind of when we think that life has, and that's been very general to sort of describe those different landscapes that we can be in, and we might experience all of those in one week. Like, when I talk about these habits, one of the things that I will say to my clients around this is, let's not think about having one rigid habit, but let's think about how you might have a base level target for key habits like sleep and nutrition and so on, and breathing and movement and all of that stuff. Let's What's a base target and what's an elite target? And your base target has to be so easy that even when you are paying the price, you can still keep on track with those. So, for example, base target might be, I follow my nutritional protocol, whatever that is, one meal a day. No matter what's happening, can I do that at least for one meal of the day? So, and breathing. Like, if my elite target is I'm going to spend at least 10 minutes in meditation, for example, then my base is I'm going to spend 1 minute doing some conscious breathing. And same with movement, it can be 1 minute. I can do it while I'm brushing my teeth, so that I can always hit those base levels no matter what's happening. And that keeps you on track. That keeps you so that the corrections aren't, you're not ending up in big swings. And even on those days where you're paying the price or you're out in the wild, kind of the fact that you're able to, kind of keep yourself on track, And be kind to yourself along that journey as well. So sorry, I know I jumped in there, but I thought you were absolutely right to raise the skepticism because it's true. Nobody's got it perfect. No one's got a perfect balance. We're all making corrections all of the time. I am. And I'm always, always tuning into that. And it just means I just don't swing. I don't swing as far, and I certainly don't get close to the burnout wall like I have done in the past.
Absolutely. That is such a mindful take on this. Such a mindful take on this, Rachel. And I so connect with, as you mentioned about the small corrections in there. Even if I'm not aligned, but every day I'm making small corrections in there. So I think this is going to definitely get retained within me. And I hope for all our listeners as well. So before we wrap up, if our listeners would like to connect with you, Rachel, what's the best way to do that?
The best way to find me is on LinkedIn, and it's Rachel spelt AEL Edmondson, and it's hyphen Clark with an E. So yeah, there's not many of us with a long name like that. So yes, but find me on LinkedIn. That would be great.
Absolutely. I'll have the link and the details in the show notes for our listeners. Connect with you, Rachel. And thank you. Thank you so for bringing such a different perspective, discussion around burnout and mental health in leaders and entrepreneurs, and at a very practical level. Uh, because I know many of us listening, they're rethinking what success really costs and what it could look like instead. So thank you so much once again, Rachel.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And to all of the listeners, thanks to every one of you for being a part of BizBlend, for tuning into this beautiful, practical conversations with exploring journeys, experiences, insights, and expertise from incredible guests like Rachel. Until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and take care of yourself and your loved ones.